from the moment that Charles became king. The question was being asked as to where he would go on his first state visit. We thought it was likely to be a Commonwealth country as he became head of the Commonwealth. And then we learnt it was to be rather closer to home, to two European countries, France and Germany, on the instructions, on the request of the government, in order to herald, as Rishi Sunak has said, this new chapter in EU-UK relations, and in particular, an improvement in Franco-British relations. So it was a really big deal, very significant.
France has been postponed following the eruption of violent protests over the French government's controversial pension reforms. Speaking a short while ago, President Macron said it was the right decision for the King not to visit just now. Let's talk to Sarah Hewson, who's Talk TV's royal editor, and Adam Sage, the Times' Paris correspondent, both of whom are on the line. Good afternoon to you both.
Afternoon, Kathy.
Sarah, just set the scene for us first, will you? How much of a blow this is that, this was King Charles's first state visit. How much store did the palace set by it?
Yeah, I think this is a really big deal, Kathy. All week we've been assured that the visit would go on, keep calm and carry on, and that the King would not be deterred by protests on the streets of France. But that decision taken, we understand, by the president, that the tour shouldn't go ahead. The first state visit of the King's reign. So much planning has gone into this from the moment that Charles became king. The question was being asked as to where he would go on his first state visit. We thought it was likely to be a Commonwealth country as he became head of the Commonwealth. And then we learnt it was to be rather closer to home, to two European countries, France and Germany, on the instructions, on the request of the government, in order to herald, as Rishi Sunak has said, this new chapter in EU-UK relations, and in particular, an improvement in Franco-British relations. So it was a really big deal, very significant, and the decision wouldn't have been taken lightly. But the optics, of course, would have been really bad for President Macron.
Well, Adam Sage, let me bring you in here because if you talk about optics, I mean, the level of violence and the number of arrests is really quite astonishing to anyone sort of not familiar with how things pan out in France. What's your take on it?
Yes, I mean, I think this campaign that started in January, it's ratcheted up a level over the last week. It has become very violent, very anarchic. It's out of control. It was organised by the unions at first, and the unions more or less keep their members in check. So they go demonstrating, they go striking. But now we've seen radical, violent anarchist groups getting involved, attacking police stations, attacking public buildings, attacking the city hall in Bordeaux that Charles and Camilla were due to visit next week. And there is definitely a feeling that this has gone up a level, and that it is out of control now.
Well, out of control, that's an interesting way of putting it, because where does this go now? How does President Macron get through this? How does France piece itself together? It feels very existential.
Well, France is permanently in an existential crisis, of course, but yes, that's right. It's difficult to see where it is going to go from here. Emmanuel Macron has said he's not going to withdraw his pension reform to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. The protesters, the unions and the other radical groups have said that they're not going to back down. They're not going to go home. And they're going to carry on the movement unless he does withdraw the reform. So it's really, really difficult to see who's going to blink first. There's another day of nationwide strikes and protests scheduled for next Tuesday, which would have coincided with the visit as well. And I think that might have been one of the reasons why it was cancelled at the last minute. And no doubt this movement will go on and on. What we've seen for the last week is in between the official union organized days of protest, there have been nightly violence really now in Paris and the other big cities, and I don't see it stopping.